Oh, this was so hard. But my winner for the 2026-2027 National Championship is the University of...
Who's ranked, who's real, who's built to last, who got exposed, who's moving fast. From the HBCU pride to the Power 5, like we talk football every week, every night. Fans in the stands, drums on go. Lights on bright, and the crowd moves slow. Big hits, ball picks, everybody knows. Daniel Roundtree got the football show.
Ahoy! I'm Daniel Roundtree. This is the Daniel Roundtree College Football Show. Welcome back. Listen, I'm excited for this episode. We've got a great episode today. Before we talk anything about the episode, did you know today is a new day? That means it is a good day to talk college football. Listen, look down. If you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and do that right now. We're asking you to subscribe, please. We want to get to 500 subscribers, and you can help do that. So hit that button, like the video, turn on your alerts. What do you have to lose? Listen, we're getting right into it today. We are going to predict the winner of the 2026-2027 National Championship, and I'm not going to waste no time at all. If you haven't seen my initial video selecting the top 12, stop what you're doing. Go ahead and watch that video and then come back to this one because that's where we're picking up where we left off. So I'm going to put the bracket up and let's get right into it and let's start talking predictions. So in my prior video, predicting the top 12 was extremely difficult, right? But when we got into the top 12, I felt there weren't going to be a lot of undefeated teams. So we had Miami at number 1 ranked overall. Two things that we got to note before I get into my prediction for the whole shebang. Who you play matters in the season. And I know a lot of people hate that certain teams are going to make it because they have an easy schedule. That's how football is. That's how it is at every single level, even at the NFL, right? Easier path guarantees you get to the championship. However, when you play real talent, stuff can happen, right? So we had Miami at number 1. We had Georgia at number 2. We had the University of Oregon at number 3. And then we had Notre Dame at number 4. That means Miami was the ACC champion. That means Georgia beat Texas in a nail-biter for the SEC championship. That means Oregon, in this prediction, beat Ohio State, which is the 5 seed in the Big Ten championship. And then Notre Dame got in as a one-loss team. Okay, now let's talk these matchups, right? And predict who I think is going to actually win these matchups. We'll start with the easiest matchup to predict, which is the 5 seed versus the 12 seed. We have the Ohio State facing off against University of Memphis. Listen, picking a group of 5 team was very difficult. I look at my bracket and I'm real confident in it. I ain't gonna lie to you. I'm confident in it except for this spot. Because the group of 5 team could be anybody. And I think the beauty of it, looking and forecasting what the schedule looks like, for this Memphis team, they play UNLV in week 1. That's another team who was on a lot of different analysts' top 12 bracket. They also are going to play Boise State, which is another team that is on a lot of different analysts' bracket. However, I'm sticking with Memphis. I have Ohio State beating Memphis handily by 3 touchdowns. So I would predict a game where we're talking 28-7 or maybe even 35-0 type of scenario. Ohio State wins. The next big matchup we got to talk about is the number 8 seed versus the number 9 seed. Now, this one's a little harder to predict. We're talking the Ole Miss Rebels in Indiana. Now, I have a little bit of buyer's remorse here because if you remember in the first video, it came down to Ole Miss and LSU for this final spot from the SEC because the SEC, I think, has 3 or 4 teams in this particular bracket. And for me, I picked Ole Miss because I believe more in the Ole Miss quarterback, Trinidad Chamberlain. However, this is tough. I'm going to stick to my guns. So I still believe in Trinidad Chamberlain, but I need you to put an asterisk because this could be an LSU team facing off against Indiana, which that would be a crazy matchup, Lane Train versus Kurt Signetti. However, that's not this scenario, so let's talk what we have on the board. Ole Miss versus Indiana. This is a game of matchups, and you got to really understand the matchups to understand how close of a game this truly would be, right? So Ole Miss has a very good defensive line. Indiana has a very good offensive line. On the outside, you got the Twin Towers for Indiana facing off against a very stingy, good Ole Miss defense that knows how to protect its weak points. However, I think Indiana wins this game. And I think Indiana wins this game because of the Twin Towers I just mentioned in Charlie Becker and then, of course, in Nick Marsh. I think those two guys are going to be too much to handle for an Ole Miss team who hasn't really seen this throughout the year, right? A team that is very balanced, a team that can run the ball, but also has these receivers that can just cause havoc. And you saw what Malachi Tony did at the end of the year against Ole Miss. That's just one guy. On the outside, these guys are going to be special. They also have Preston in the slot. I think Indiana is going to beat Ole Miss. However, I think it's going to be a really close game. I think Indiana wins this game by a last-second field goal or by one touchdown. We're talking a one-possession game. Indiana over Ole Miss. If I had to predict the score, I would say this would be a higher scoring game, a 33-35. Indiana has the 35. They advance. Okay, the next matchup that I had, this is the 6th seed versus the number 11 seed. And in this, the 6th seed is actually the Big 12 winner, which, spoiler alert, I didn't have Texas Tech. I didn't have BYU. I put Houston in. Willie Fritz in the game at this number 6 spot after winning the Big 12. Remember, you don't get a guaranteed spot in the top 4 just because you win your Power 4 conference. It's based off of overall best teams. So I have Houston playing a very, very good, stingy defensive team in OU. So it's going to be at the University of Houston. Great game. However, I think OU's defense is going to be too much to handle for this Big 12 offense and the University of Houston. I think Willie Fritz is going to scheme up the trick plays. Obviously, you can see that I think a lot of Willie Fritz. I think he's a great coach. However, he's not going to be able to do nothing with David Stone and them big boys in them trenches. So I have OU winning this game by 2 touchdowns or more. I'm predicting the score of 28-14, maybe 24-10, where OU is just going to dominate this game, primarily in the run game as well as on defense. Surprise, surprise, John Mateer is not going to need to do a bunch of it through the air. They're going to protect this guy for the rest of the playoffs. So OU beats Houston. And then the final matchup. So in this matchup, I did have 2 ACC teams getting into the playoffs. So it will be SMU versus Texas, number 10 seed versus number 7 seed. For the entire state of Texas, man, people who grew up in Texas watching this game a long time ago when they used to play on a regular basis, it would be like a kid in a candy store, right? This would be a great matchup, fun to watch. It will be at the University of Texas. And as torn as I am, because this is my alma mater, my degree says Southern Methodist University. I'm torn. I'm torn because I really like Kevin Jennings. I really think SMU this year, compared to other years, is very underrated. I think SMU, in the past, they haven't got recognition. There were a lot of pieces that people knew about. This year's SMU team is quietly very, very good. Great offensive line. They did very good things in the portal, especially from a receiver standpoint. I love the running back that they got from the University of Cal. I think the defense is going to be stingy. I say all that to say, unfortunately, I'm a realist. And in this scenario, it's not about who I like the most. I got to do my job and analyze both teams. Texas will beat SMU in this scenario, especially playing at home. You got Arch Manning, you got Cam Coleman, you got Ryan Wingo. You have just too much firepower. And the biggest knock that I have seen from my Mustangs is, especially in the big games postseason, Kevin Jennings in the past has kind of let the nerves get to him. And he was a young quarterback, so that hopefully changed this year. But based on what I've seen in the past, we saw SMU make the playoffs and play a Penn State team at home where they were just overwhelmed. A couple weeks before that, they played Clemson in the ACC championship, and they were overwhelmed. They almost came back, but I think that might be what we would see. I hate to say it, in the game SMU versus Texas. I hope I'm wrong. Red, I believe in you. So listen, call it superstitious. I don't want to pick SMU too soon, and I'd rather y'all surprise me. So I got Texas beating SMU in this matchup. Okay, so here's where it gets fun. Here's where it gets ultra exciting. So if you haven't seen my last video, no worries. After this video, go watch it and get an update on the rule changes. So in this year's playoffs, oh man, it's going to be so fun. It's going to be prime time TV, okay? So in this year's playoffs, the top 3 seeds are going to be able to pick their opponent. So don't worry about how the bracket looks right now, because the bracket is going to change, because each team, based on their ranking, will pick their opponent. So starting at number 1, the University of Miami is going to pick who they want to play, and then it goes down from there. Here's the tough part. You look at the teams that have won. I'm going to read them off to you. We have Ohio State, we have Indiana, we have Texas, and we have OU. If you put yourself in the University of Miami shoes, because you don't ever want to pick wrong, who would you want to pick? That's the beauty of playoff football. All of these teams are really good. It's a tough draw. I doubt Miami will want to play Indiana again in this first round, right? I also doubt that they will want to play Ohio State again in this first round. They probably would prefer to see them in a semifinal. And Texas is a team that I think if they're able to get into the playoffs, I just think they're going to be a team just like Miami last year. I think they're going to be that team that everyone's kind of looking like, I don't know if I want to play Arch Manning and them boys in a game where it really, really counts. So that being said, I know OU fans, I know, but Miami's going to call you out. If this scenario played out, I think OU is the lesser of the 3. And that's not saying OU is a slouch. OU is no slouch. However, when I look at OU, and again, I look at matchups, OU from a receiver standpoint, they've got the speedy Isaiah Satigna, then they have the big body and Trey Harris. However, the run game is the big question. And when you look at Miami's defense in particular, they are going to be phenomenal again against the run. I think people are so focused in on the loss of Akeem Mesidor and Ruben Bain in the first round of the draft that they're not realizing who they reloaded with. Damon Wilson, who was regarded by multiple scouts as probably the best defensive end prospect overall in the country. Now, just because scouts are saying he still has to produce, right? New system, new team. All that to say is that D-line is reloaded. Let's look at some other matchups, because these matchups I want to really focus in on, okay? So let's look at the run game on the other side. So Miami's offensive run game versus OU, I think is going to be much more of a stalemate than people think, because OU's D-line is absolutely the strength of their team. And then a lot of people keep forgetting, just because Mario Cristobal is a great offensive line coach, that Miami's offensive line is going to be young, right? You're going to have Jackson Cantwell. You might even have Ben Cogden. You got all these young guys, because Miami lost 4 of the 5 starting offensive linemen last year. However, this offensive line, I think, is still going to be good. I'm just saying it early. That doesn't mean that good doesn't always translate, because you can be good but still make boneheaded, simple mistakes as a young guy, true freshman, playing in this giant game, biggest game you've ever played in. Long story short, Miami versus OU. We'll come back to my prediction. I want to finish out these call-outs. So next up on the clock, we have Georgia. So Georgia will look at this. OU's off the board. And they will see an Indiana team who just went to the national championship and won it last year with Curt Cignetti. They would see a team in Texas who they just played a few weeks ago in the SEC championship and barely escaped, just skated by, right? And then they will see a team in the Ohio State, right? That Ohio State is Ohio State, right? They're going to have Jeremiah Smith, multiple other great receivers, Brandon Ennis, Devin McEwen, Chris Henry Jr., Bo Jackson, maybe even Legend Bay at running back. The defense is going to be extremely stout. Georgia's going to have a hard selection looking at these 3 teams that they have to choose from now that OU is off the board. So I think Georgia would look at it and they would say, no, I don't want to play Texas again. I just played Texas. If I have to play them again, I'd much rather it be in a semifinal, because there's too much familiarity seeing that we just played just a few weeks ago, right? So I don't think they would pick Texas. So it comes down to Ohio State and Indiana. Now, this is tough because I think Georgia, the last time they played Ohio State, it was an amazing matchup. Really, really close game. Georgia ended up winning that game and going on to win the national championship. Marvin Harrison was going crazy in that game, and Ohio State might have won that game if Marvin Harrison didn't get knocked out of the game, literally knocked out of the game with a major concussion. So I think Georgia is going to look at it and say, do I want to face Ohio State again, or do I want to face an Indiana team that just won a national championship? And I think Georgia is going to call out Kurt Cignetti and them boys. Kurt Cignetti. I think he's going to call them out, and I think Georgia is going to want to play Indiana, the Hoosiers. That's right. Okay. We'll talk about matchups, but I want to get to the other two matchups really quick, and then I'll pick the winners for this round. So the last selection is University of Oregon, right? So Oregon is going to be on the clock. They only will have two teams to choose from. Notre Dame, you're just going to get whoever's left over. Oregon's going to look at this, and they're going to say, similar to Georgia, right? They're going to say, okay, do I want to play Ohio State? We just played them in the Big Ten championship, extremely close game. We barely got by there, right? And also, if you remember, Oregon is probably going to have a little bit of PTSD from the last time they beat Ohio State, got into the playoffs, played Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, and got dog walked. God dang. Hey, Oregon with Dylan Gabriel got dog walked the last time they played Ohio State when it really mattered. I think that's going to be in the back of their head. And they're going to see Texas over there, an opponent they haven't played. Keep in mind, this is going to be one of the best Oregon rosters that Oregon has seen in the last 20 years. Guys who know Oregon, I think Oregon being so far West Coast, there's a lot of people who don't really follow Oregon for real, don't really understand. These guys have had multiple top 5, top 10 recruiting classes. They are loaded everywhere. Oregon is one of the best teams in college football, right? So they're going to look at it. They're going to have all that in the back of the mind I just said about Ohio State, and then they're going to look over at Texas, and they're going to say to themselves, well, which team do we want to face? Familiarity or a team we've never faced? It's going to be hard no matter what, right? Texas, we know what Texas has. I think Oregon is going to call out Sark and them boys and say, Texas, come on, we ready. We're going to have to play good football at some point anyways. We just played Ohio State. We want to see you. So Oregon versus Texas is the final matchup, which would leave a prior national championship matchup, which will be lights, camera, action. You dig? Prime time. We are talking Notre Dame and Ohio State would be the final matchup. And whew, that would be primetime TV, this Notre Dame team versus this Ohio State team. So before I go into the predictions, just real quick, I don't know if the 1 seed gets to pick their path the entire way. So we're not going to just assume that. It's going to be bracket from here on out after I announce these particular winners, okay? So what's going to end up happening, let's start bottom to top. Notre Dame is facing off against Ohio State. You got C.J. Carr. You got Julian Sayin. You got Bo Jackson. You got Jeremiah Smith. You have multiple guys on the Notre Dame roster who played at Ohio State, and Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham. There's familiarity here. This is going to be an amazing game to watch, especially from a matchup standpoint. And I think there's some great matchups that we got to touch on this game before we pick the winner. One of the biggest matchups overall in this game, Jeremiah Smith versus Leonard Moore. Listen, this matchup is going to have NFL scouts salivating. They're going to be going crazy to be able to watch this matchup with Jeremiah Smith and Leonard Moore. You're probably at this point of the season going to have Chris Henry on the other side, true twin towers. And then on the offensive line and defensive lines, there's going to be some amazing, very fun matchups between the offensive line of Ohio State and that defensive line of Notre Dame, and vice versa. Where I'm really excited to watch, which I think is underrated, is absolutely going to be Notre Dame's linebackers going against Ohio State's really good young running backs. Listen, I didn't make one. I didn't have time, but Notre Dame has probably the top linebacking crew in all of the country going into this season. So that's a huge strength for them, along with their back seven. Their DBs and linebackers, I think, are top-notch, top 3 in the country across the board. The D-line, little iffy, and some people don't like that I say that. I'm honest about it. I said it even last year. The D-line, to me, very good, very stout, great against the run. They're not as twitchy and explosive as I would like to see. For Ohio State, I think the offense is going to be clicking at this point. It's going to be a very, very good game, hard-fought game. This is a game that I could see being very close. I'm talking 17-14 or maybe even 10-13 where we have a bunch of field goals. But the winner of this game, Notre Dame versus the Ohio State, would be Ohio State, the Buckeyes. Listen, Notre Dame fans, before you get mad, before you go in an uproar, I want you to be honest with yourself, because Ohio State and Notre Dame, aside from the national championship we had a couple years ago, this is a old school rivalry of sorts, right? Notre Dame and Ohio State have met many times. And the truth of the matter that Notre Dame fans probably don't want to admit, y'all are the little brother. Hey, it's just me being honest. Notre Dame, y'all are the little brother in this rivalry. Go look up the stats. I did. I know what I'm talking about. I can't wait. I'm looking forward to arguing with you. And I don't want you to bring up the 80s and 90s and the 70s, back when Notre Dame was just killing it. No one cares about that. 2000s and up, Ohio State has dominated anytime they played Notre Dame. It hasn't been close in multiple matchups. This one will be no different. Ohio State beats Notre Dame. Let's go over to my favorite matchup right before we get to the semifinals. My favorite matchup by far, Oregon and Texas. Listen, these are two teams that are on a collision course. I feel like no matter what, from a roster standpoint, both of these rosters are loaded. Good God. Listen, when we look at Oregon, DeCorian Moore, Evan Stewart, you got McClellan, great tight end. You got Dante Moore, who arguably may be the #1 overall quarterback selected in this upcoming draft, unless he has another hiccup like he did against Indiana in the playoffs last year. This offense and this defense, listen, for the defense, Coy Parrish, you got Bear Alexander, you got Ukulele, you got all these different guys. I have to mention it. It's so fun playing with Oregon in college football 27 because their whole D-line is star players, and that's real life. Listen, this Oregon team is loaded. However, look at Texas as well. At Texas, we have Cam Coleman, Ryan Wingo. I'm going to say him as many times as I need to say it. Emmett Mosley. You have Arch Manning. He's a daggone Manning. Arch Manning. Listen, I also got to mention on the defensive side of the ball, Colin Simmons. This matchup is going to be electric. This is one of those games. It's either going to be a knockout, drag-out, field goals, no one's scoring, or the exact opposite. I'm talking a shootout to the point where the defenses, despite being extremely good, are getting exposed. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I don't. So that means I think this is going to be a knockdown, drag-out, nail-biter of a close game that some people might not enjoy because there's not going to be a lot of touchdowns. I could see this game, despite both offenses being so loaded, I could see this game being a 17-21 type of game, or 20-21. Yes, that's right, 1 point type of game. And I'm going back and forth. Do I pick Oregon? Do I pick Texas? Listen, I have to be honest with you. It's tough because with these matchups, you look at it and it's like, man, this is a perfect example. Best conference is on the line. I had to look at which coach and which quarterback has the capability to get their team over the hump, and I still couldn't decide. Listen, both of these teams have had blunders, right? So you look at Dan Lanning and his playoff runs and how they always have come short of where they need to be. It's the same exact thing for Steve Sarkisian. I look at the quarterbacks, same daggone thing. In fact, Arch Manning hasn't even ever been a starter, right, in the college football playoffs. So even in this moment, I'm thinking about changing my pick. I honestly am, but I'm going to stick to my guns. In this Oregon versus Texas matchup, despite all the matchups I just mentioned, I have the University of Texas. That's right. The Longhorns, hook 'em. I have Texas beating Oregon and going on to the semifinal round. I think it's going to be a nail-biter, extremely close game. I looked at everything, And when it came down to it, despite the lack of experience for Arch Manning's capability with his legs and their run game, Texas's run game is going to be so special this year. That's the advantage. I think with Relique Brown, with Hollywood Smothers, Texas is going to be able to control the ball a little bit more. And if it gets into a ball control scenario where one team is fighting to have the ball last, I think Texas is going to be able to do that just a little bit better than Oregon. Texas is going to win, go on to the semifinal. Let's look at Indiana, Georgia. Woo! Listen, this matchup of Indiana and Georgia is going to be also very close to one of my favorite matchups. You got the Twin Towers. We already mentioned them, Charlie Becker, Nick Marsh. You're going to have them going against great cornerbacks like Ellis Robinson on the other side. Georgia defense is always fantastic. Listen, I have not hit it at all in regards to being honest about Kirby Smart being one of my favorite defenses to watch and study. Listen, if I ever get into coaching, first thing I'm doing, I'm reaching out to Kirby Smart. Hey, man, I want to come just study and just learn under you for a year or so here because Kirby Smart's defenses are so fun. The way he blends man coverage with zone, with the all-out blitzes, with what looks like an all-out blitz, but they'll have a whole guy. They just do so much, right? Now, you match that up against Curt Cignetti, this offensive genius, this quarterback guru. This game, I think, will be lights, camera, action, absolute prime time. It's another one, very hard to select, right? Because Georgia has had this stigma for the last couple of years where they're getting bounced. Right after having a bye, they play a game, they're getting bounced. It happened with Ole Miss. It happened the year prior as well. For Georgia, that's not a good sign when you're playing a team like Curt Cignetti, who, with Indiana, the Hoosiers, they're known for being the most prepared team, right? Known for understanding and over-evaluating the film to the point where it's not over, it's perfectly evaluated because their offensive scheme and play is going to be perfect against you. And you saw that in the national championship in the entire playoff run last year for Indiana. They killed Alabama, right? It wasn't even close. All of their games just seemed too easy for Indiana. This one won't be the case for Georgia, right? Because there's great matchups. I don't want to take too much time going into all the matchups. Here's what I think will happen. Indiana beats Georgia. That's right. The Hoosiers, they beat them dogs. The only way I can see Georgia absolutely winning this game is if it's in the Atlanta Superdome, or however you call it, Chick-fil-A Center out there in Atlanta, which is essentially a home game for the University of Georgia. If that's where they play, then I will absolutely change my prediction. Georgia is going to win there. Georgia has always played and won there. That is a place for them where it's hard to beat them there, right? However, anywhere else, if it's Fiesta Bowl, if they're at the Cotton Bowl in Texas, I have Indiana winning because of Curt Cignetti. And I just think that he's going to scheme it up so perfectly against an aggressive Georgia defense to put them in bad spots the same way Ole Miss did last year. And again, this is recency bias because I saw how Ole Miss kind of exposed that very, very good Georgia defense. And I also saw how Georgia struggled to run the ball last year. I think Georgia will be improved in that area this year, but Indiana will get the win. Finally, we have Miami versus OU, and I think this is a great game. So many great matchups. I mentioned some of them earlier, so I'm going to skip it because I want to get to the next round and get right to the winner, the pick. This is going to be a close game. This is another game that I think a little bit different than the others. I could see this game being a little bit higher scoring. We're talking mid to high 20s. I'm talking 24-27 or 24-28, where it's going to come down to a field goal or one possession game. I have the University of Miami, the U. I got the U winning this game. Listen, some of the things I mentioned earlier are key reasons. The biggest reason overall that I have the U beating OU would be the running game. Miami has a stable of running backs in Mark Flesher and Jordan Lyle and Gerard Pringle and Marty Brown. And then they also have a true freshman. These guys have a stable of running backs. And because of that depth, it doesn't matter who's going to be the starter by the time they get to OU. That O-line is going to be ready. And I think OU has a great offensive line as well. Also a lot of younger guys. However, Miami's mix of trench warfare with their run game, you're going to see what you saw last year. And I think Miami just has that capability to really perform in these playoff-style games where the gameplay slows down and it comes down to who's the biggest and the baddest. Miami, a lot of times, they're going to win that type of battle. There's less flash in the playoffs. We saw what kind of happened to OU, and I think it could be similar. I think OU could get out to an early lead against Miami because their offense is a lot to take in when you first line up against a John Mateer and those guys going fast. At the end of the day, Miami is going to win this game. So, who's our winners? We got the University of Miami, the U. We got the Indiana Hoosiers. We also are going to have Texas. And then last but certainly not least, we have the Ohio State University. Let's look at matchups, right? Let's go over and look at matchups. So in this next scenario, we will have two phenomenal matchups, right? So you're going to have Indiana facing off against Texas, and then we're going to have a matchup repeat of last year's second round of the playoffs in the Ohio State against University of Miami. This will definitely be a grudge match. Man, oh man, would these two matchups be so fun to watch. Listen, let's talk about Indiana and Texas first, because I think this matchup is so intriguing of two teams who arguably are almost identical in regards to their makeup. I think the biggest difference is Indiana is more veteran. It's always talked about how old the Indiana guys are, right? However, Texas is very veteran as well. They both have twin towers on the outside. Ryan Wingo, Cam Coleman, Charlie Becker, Nick Marsh. They both are going to have very solid running backs. I think Texas has a little bit of an edge running back-wise. Great O-lines on both sides of the ball. Great defensive lines on both sides of the ball. And then great back sevens. This game is very difficult to predict because it's almost like mirror image, right? They look alike, right? You got two teams who can both do very similar things. I think my favorite thing about this matchup, before I pick the winner, this is going to be extremely fun offensive game. If you like high scoring, this is the game you will want to watch. This is going to be a game that I think will get definitely in the low to mid 30s because you have Steve Sarkisian going against Curt Cignetti, and those are two great offensive gurus, offensive minds. I think the defense would take a back step in this game because of how good both of these offenses would be. I'm talking this would be a 33-35 type of game, and it will come down to the wire. Now listen, before you get mad at me, listen, this one was tough. I've changed my mind on this 3 or 4 times. I've written it down, Indiana wins. I've written it down, Texas wins. I've gone back and forth on which team I think will win this particular game 1,000 times because I respect both coaches so well. It's extremely hard to bet against a Curt Cignetti. It's extremely hard to bet against a Steve Sarkisian with a team as stacked as his team is. However, I think if this were to come to fruition, Indiana versus Texas doesn't even matter where it's played. I don't care if it was in Austin. It wouldn't be because this would be one of the bowl games. It will be Sugar Bowl or Fiesta Bowl or Orange Bowl. Doesn't matter where it's played. I have the University of Texas. That's right. I have Steve Sarkisian and those guys getting to their first national championship under Steve Sarkisian. Listen, I put them number 1 in my way too early preseason top 25 for a reason. I think this roster mirrors a roster like what Ohio State had when they won a national championship a few years ago. I'm not saying Texas is going to win a national championship. Don't get it twisted. However, I look at this roster and I look at Texas and I look how much money they spent, and it looks just like that roster when they had Junkins and they had all those different guys at Ohio State that they went and got in the portal so that there was so much depth. That's Texas. The only team I think that in the semifinal that Texas has faced so far would have been Oregon. That game would have came down to the wire. I think this game with Indiana will also come down to the wire, but it will be more so due to coaching and how great the coaches are on the Indiana side versus talent. Talent for talent, I look at both of these teams and I'm just like, Texas has to win this game, right? The good thing is we will have to see them actually play, but I picked Texas to make it to their first national championship in a very long time since it was Vince Young and them guys down there in Austin. Okay, let's go over to the next game because we got to talk about the national championship. We got DU, Miami, University of Miami facing off against Ohio State, those Buckeyes. This is going to be a fun matchup. This is going to be a grudge match. Jeremiah Smith has already said it out loud. He wants this matchup. He's trying to end his college career legendary because even if Jeremiah gets hurt, he's still going into the draft this year. It's done for him. This is his final year. And then on the Miami side, listen, you got Mensah, you got Malachi Tony, you got Mark Fletcher in his last year. Fletcher put him on a stretcher. This is going to be an amazing, amazing game. When I say absolute Hollywood, when I say a script couldn't write how good this game would end, I don't think at all it's going to be like last year. Last year when Miami and Ohio State played, Miami dominated that game. And Miami had the better offensive line and better defensive line. By far, you could see that. Go back and watch the game. If you don't believe me, just watch the trenches. Don't worry about where the ball goes. Just watch Miami's offensive line going against those stars, right? Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, great players. Curry, Ohio State had a great defense. However, they were getting bullied. I'm just being honest. Last year, not this year. This year is going to be different. Younger offensive line, but still a very stout defense. Kenyatta Jackson, all these different guys on the Ohio State. They got a pair of Alabama transfers, Russo and some of those other guys. This trench warfare is going to be absolutely insane compared to last year. This is a game that, again, I think will come down to the wire. I can see this game being 21-24. I can see this game also possibly even going into overtime because of how much of a grudge match it's going to be, just like when Ohio State played Miami back in 2002 for the national championship. Here's what I came down to. The winner of this very hard-fought semifinal game that will probably go into overtime and be a game that is end up being won by a field goal, 24-21 or 24-22. I have Ohio State University. Now listen, don't get it twisted. I'm a South Florida kid. I grew up in South Florida, grew up watching the U. And the thing about it, when I look at this game, I think so much has changed from last year to this year in regards to star potential. So think about the game last year. Go back and watch it. I watched it in the offseason. If Keontae Scott hadn't got that pick six to put Miami ahead, the entire game would have been different. Keontae Scott gets that pick six, it's 14-0. Ohio State's in trail mode the rest of the game. They go into halftime with a donut. Very tough to win those types of games. However, if he didn't get it, Ohio State was on their own 20-yard line. Jeremiah Smith had just had a big play, and they could have scored and made the game 7-7. Momentum would have been tied. I say all this to say, this year I think Ryan Day is going to be much more meticulous if they have to face an explosive Miami team again. And it could be superstition. Who knows? Just like I said with my SMU Mustangs, I don't know. But I have Ohio State beating Miami in this rematch, grudge match of teams where it's going to be extremely physical. It's going to be extremely fun to watch. But Ohio State is going back to the national championship. It's kind of hard to deny Jeremiah Smith in his final year. So there you have it. The national championship matchup is set. I will have the Ohio State facing off against the Texas Longhorns in a matchup of all matchups. The crazy thing is, didn't these guys play early in the season? Okay, yes, this would be a rematch of Ohio State and Texas that play, I think, in week 2 or week 3. The thing about two rosters that are really good is really good teams always end up meeting again, either in the playoffs or in the championship. And I think this is exactly what would happen. It doesn't matter who won earlier in the year, so early in the season that these two teams will both be two different teams. Listen, football is hard. Football is physical. Guys get hurt. I hate to say it. So there could be guys in this game that absolutely affected that first game who aren't even playing, aren't even suited up in this national championship game of Ohio State and the University of Texas. I don't want to go through all the matchups because I've already talked about how good each and every one of these teams are. We are going to talk about who the winner, the national championship of the 2026-2027 season is. The University of Ohio State. That's right. I have the Buckeyes beating Steve Sarkisian in his first national championship appearance. This would be an amazing game, a truly hard-fought game. Listen, this is also a grudge match, playing Texas again. However, I think it's going to end in a similar fashion where Texas gets all the way to the dance, and experience pays off for Ryan Day, a guy who's been there and done it before. I think Ohio State is going to win the national championship this year in the 2026-2027 season. I think it's going to be so hard to stop Jeremiah Smith, Brandon Ennis, Chris Henry Jr., Bo Jackson, Legend Bay, all these different guys. I think Julian Sayin is going to be much more advanced and more experienced and more ready to play better under pressure. That is what got him in trouble against Indiana, against Miami. He freaked out under pressure. He played a whole season not getting hit, and now he had to perform in those 2 games where he was getting beat up. He was getting brutalized. Well, listen, Ohio State is going to overcome Texas. They're going to stop that amazing run game that Texas has. And although Texas is my preseason favorite, right, in my preseason way too early top 25, I have Ohio State beating them. I think Texas will win the game in Austin. I do think Texas would do that. I think playing at home is a huge advantage. You saw it when Arch and the boys of Texas had to go out to Columbus and play Ohio State. I think that's going to happen again in the regular season. Texas is going to probably beat Ohio State, but if Ohio State gets this shot to play Texas again for all the marbles when it matters the most, I have the Ohio State University winning this year's 2026-2027 national championship. Let me know, who did I get it right? Who did I get it wrong? Tell me in the comments. I can't wait to hear from you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, we have that goal of getting to 500 subscribers. If you haven't done it already, look down, hit that subscribe button. We'll talk to you soon. This is the Daniel Roundtree College Football Show.
Daniel Roundtree got the